Welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm Michael Jackson.
And I'm sure you're wondering why we're wearing white gloves.
So am I.
So yes, fair point. Because we've got a very special product, and all will be revealed in just 1 second. But needless to say, this very special product is so beautiful that it should remain untouched by human hands.
Yes, and you get a free pair of gloves when you buy it as well, for that very reason.
Look at this. It's great, isn't it? Yes, indeed. So these are the gloves, and the product which we are going to be talking about is the
English Acoustics Stereo 21C.
Shall we see if we can do it?
Yep.
It takes a little bit of jiggery-pokery because it is the heaviest amplifier
in the world.
Ever.
In the world.
In the world. Look at that. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, crikey. Okay, Peter,
there you go.
Peter Farrow's going to be chuffed with me doing this. There we are, look at that. That is something. That really is. I'm going to put it down because it really does weigh a ton.
Yeah.
And David, give us just a little bit of background on this amazing piece of beautiful English.
Can I take the glove off?
Now? There's amazing English hi-fi equipment.
Yeah, so it's the, I think it's fair to say, it's a loving recreation of the original Leek Stereo 20 valve amplifier. Funnily enough, the Stereo 20 is one of my favourite valve amps.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, I genuinely didn't know
yeah.
that. Okay.
So I heard one, so I think it was probably about the late 80s, and I went to buy some hi-fi from someone in London, I think it was early 90s, and he demonstrated it. I think it was, I can't remember what I was buying, but it was some random thing from Loot or something. You remember Loot newspaper that used to come out, the free ads paper.
Sure.
And he had a Stereo 20.
Wow.
And I remember listening to ABC's Lexicon of Love with Haybrook HB1s driven by a Stereo 20, and I was very impressed. And then I ended up working at Hi-Fi World, which of course was kind of valve amplifier central.
Yes.
And I was... because we'd heard, I think, a Quad 2 or something like that before.
Yeah. I was quite familiar with the quad equipment. And also the Radford valve amps. We used to retail the Radford amps back in the day as well.
But I think neither of us were particularly impressed by the Quad 2.
No, I wasn't. I have to say, it didn't quite do it for me. For whatever reason. It felt, oh God, I've got to be really careful here because we're going to upset loads of people, but it just felt a little bit slow and sluggish to me, a bit coloured.
Yeah.
Wasn't quite my thing. And actually, to be fair to the Radfords, I was really impressed with those. They were terrific amps, but I didn't know you had such a like for the Stereo 20.
No, it's a very, very good amp and very affordable. Certainly in the early 90s, before the valve amp boom, you could pick them up for sort of 200 quid or something.
Yes,
And it was a very sweet sounding, very musical amp. And compact as well, and easy to use, and so on. And it seems that I wasn't the only fan of a Stereo 20, because the person behind English Acoustics, Pete Farrow, was also into them, and I think he bought one very early on, or acquired one very early on, and kept it as his main amplifier. Probably when you were using your name Nate, Mike, and I was using my MVA back in the 80s.
I wish we'd known Peter Farrow for longer, because I could imagine having some wonderful arguments with him, because he's always been a valve aficionado, and we've always been into our Nates and our exposures and our NVAs and all of these things, and we could have had some great bitter conflicts with him.
Yeah.
But he is actually one of the nicest people, and he makes this phenomenally great amplifier.
Yes.
I'm going to just say one thing though here. It's not just a sort of Stereo 20 reincarnate, is it? It's a lot smarter than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say that it isn't a Leek Stereo 20 that's been rebuilt by Pete and given a nice coat of paint and sold on. Basically, he's remanufacturing them with the same circuit, but a few modifications, and I think superior components, I think it's fair to say.
Without a doubt. Yes.
Some of which he spent a lot of time sourcing, and some of which he's had to have made specifically.
Yes, and lovingly manufacturing them, because Pete is so enthusiastic about this. And he's, and the quality shines through, and you could see, you can see it in his eyes when you meet him. He'd never ever want to make a bad product. He wants to make the best he possibly can out of what he's got.
Yeah.
And he's doing it because this is a stunningly brilliant amplifier, isn't it? And it is just fabulous. Talking about colours, and I love this. You can have these in pretty much any colour you want. I'm not sure how well the camera's picking this up, but this is in British Leyland Brown, apparently.
I'm not sure that's the exact colour name, Mike.
Oh, I don't know. I had a Mini Clubman estate in exactly this colour.
Yes.
1977 Mini Clubman estate in British Leyland Brown. It's actually known as another type of brown, but we're not allowed to really say that on YouTube without getting past the censor.
Yeah.
You can have this in any finish you like, but the finish is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really does look quite something.
Yeah. And it's I think this particular one is probably something from a kind of reasonably recent BMW paint catalogue. It's kind of metallic.
He's going to kill me, isn't he?
Metallic brown. Very nice. But it reminds me of Ford Roman bronze. You used to see Granada gears and Cortinas and stuff in that colour in the mid-late 70s. So he's probably not going to be very happy when I say that either.
No, thanks. We won't get any more. This is going to be the last review we're going to be doing for Pete, obviously.
Yeah. But you can get them in any colour you like. The Stereo 20, the original Leek Stereo 20 came in champagne gold, which is a lovely gold colour. Yes. And it's one I'm sure that Ken Ishiwata liked in his lifetime, because that's sort of Marantz kind of colour almost.
Yeah.
They also did a kind of gold bronze, and then Leek then did them in dark grey, I think, in 1964.
They were like a dark grey. Almost like a sort of like one of the quad sort of 606 sort of greys, wasn't it? So, but I've seen this in a gorgeous sort of pearlescent white.
Yeah.
It even does them in those sort of paints which sort of almost change colour when you get different lights in them, which are just amazing. So, but look, that's not why you buy it, is it? You buy it for what it sounds like. And well, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of the best valve amplifiers I've heard, actually.
So hang on, let's just rewind then. So you loved the original Leek 20, and Peter Farrow has taken it away and brought it up to the 21st century.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to like it even more, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. So the original one was based on a standard Mullard circuit. I think it's fair to say that most valve amplifiers you can buy, even by the 50s and 60s, they were using circuits which had been developed quite a long time before, often when the valves themselves were actually launched. And the manufacturers of the valves would give sort of application notes and suggested circuits. And this is a Mullard circuit for EL84s. And obviously that's what the Stereo 20 uses, and the Stereo 21C, this uses that too. It uses 4 EL84s. It's got, for valve aficionados, it's got 2 ECC 83 double triodes on the input, and a GZ34 rectifier. So about 11 watts per channel from the standard Leek. The 21C, Pete reckons, is about 14 watts per channel. And I think that's the loudest 14 watts per channel I've ever heard.
Yes.
So
yes. Yeah, sure.
It really, you can really push it hard, and there's none of the kind of motorboating sound that you get from sort of lower powered valve amplifiers, especially older ones, which is basically kind of farting. It's a kind of bleh. When you turn up the volume too high. Sorry, Mike. You turn up the volume too high on some of these old valve amps, or indeed modern ones with bad output transformers, and as the volume goes up, the distortion goes up, and then it basically lets go and kind of emits a kind of flatulent type of sound as it struggles, as transformers struggle, by being overloaded. So everything done on the Stereo 21C. The output transformers are custom made, custom specified. I think Pete would say that they're substantially better than the Stereo 20 Leek output trannies. But still, the ones on the original Leak were substantially better than most valve amps of that time.
Sure.
Which I think is one of the reasons why it sounded so good compared to many of its rivals.
Sure.
So you get a very fulsome valve sound, don't you? I think it's fair
without
to say.
a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And if I just rewind a little bit, and you're talking about this being about so 14 watts per channel. Don't confuse that with the fact that it doesn't drive speakers to go loud, because it can do if you want them to. It's really got sort of a huge amount of peak current delivery and all of these sort of key things for dynamics and so on. But it will cope with pretty much any speaker you chuck at it. We've had it through some really difficult loads.
Yep.
I've had it through my isobarics and my Saras, and no issues whatsoever. And they're not the easiest speakers to drive with the isobaric principle. But no problem at all. But yeah, the sound is really beguiling. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And how I kind of described the quad, that sort of slightly sort of bulbous sound, little bit bloated. This is nothing like that. This is a revelation.
Yeah.
It's fast. It's dynamic. It's so detailed.
Yeah.
It's super sweet. If you haven't heard an amazing valve amplifier, then this could be a great opportunity to do it, because it'll change your life.
Yeah.
It really will.
Well, it'll certainly bankrupt you for electricity anyway.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So you'll literally be using candles to save on your electricity bill.
Worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It adds to the ambience as well.
But I mean, the classic kind of fallacy about valve amplifiers, as far as people who've only ever heard solid state, is that valve amplifiers are fat and slow, and lifeless and kind of sat upon. And I think that is true with bad valve amplifiers. Yes. But in the same way that you get good and bad solid state amps and good and bad Class Ds and so on, there is a wide range. And a lot of the old valve amps were very thick and coloured and low powered. But even the Stereo 20, the standard one, that in good condition, sounds surprisingly modern and fast and punchy and dynamic, and not as coloured as you'd think. But this is on another level. So it's got half the distortion of the original Stereo 20, and it sounds cleaner and faster. It sounds very fast, very energetic, and very engaging, doesn't it? Very sinewy, in a way that is just really special. If you're used to solid state amps, even very good ones, it's hard not to like this, I'd say.
It is really special. You're absolutely right. And had we met Pete when we were sort of 14 or 15 years old, then it would have been quite an interesting sort of conversation to have, I'm sure, because we would have been adamant that our solid state amps would be better than his valve amps. And actually, the proof of the pudding may actually be the other way around. Because I know that with your very tricky to drive Yamahas, you use valves quite a lot.
Yep.
And no problem at all. And I know you used one of these for a long time, because I've heard it on many occasions.
Yeah.
And it just makes the most beautiful sound.
Really it drove the NS1000s very well. Actually.
And do you know what? I'm going to say something here, and I think this is probably going to sound really blatantly obvious, but it sounds really good with the digital source, and we've used it with some of your chord equipment as well.
Yeah.
But when you've used a turntable with a nice phono stage, and this valve preamp and your NS1000s, it's just, I think, as good as I've heard your system sound. Really, really stunning.
Yeah.
And also not just sort of from that kind of hi-fi point of view, but from that I can't stop tapping my foot point of view.
Yeah.
Just sounds so fun to listen to, so enjoyable, so pleasurable. We kind of get away from that, don't we, in hi-fi? We sort of tend to listen to the music listen to the hi-fi rather than listen to the music.
Yeah.
And I think with the system, with I think with your gyro deck, and with I think you've got a really lovely Sony preamp, and with the leak with the leak, the English Acoustics here, and the NS1000s. It's just a foot tapping dream.
Yeah,
it really is. It's a hard one to describe, isn't it? And you've heard it many times, the difference between hi-fi and musical.
Yeah.
And we talk about it a lot on this channel. So.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously it's only a 14 watt valve amp. It sounds much louder than 14 watts, and it gives you the full 14 watts before it kind of lets go, unlike many valve amps. But it doesn't have half a kilowatt of power. But within its kind of operating envelope is hugely enjoyable, and there's a certain romance to it as well. And I think that's something that's really true about valves, and it's why so many people do like valves, and many people have gone from. I know many people who certainly when I was editing Hi-Fi World, they say, I've got the top name system now, and I've just kind of I want the change, and they go to valves and they'd be raving because about how good it was, because you get a different presentation. It is more romantic. It's slightly kind of ethereal. It's possibly, you could argue, not hugely accurate, but there is something that certainly in the time domain as well, not just the tonality. You get a very direct and musical sound, which the best valve amps do incredibly well, and they do them so well you're happy to put up with any failings they have in other departments. For example, like soggy bass, that you do get from valve amps because of their poor damping factor. So the trick is, as ever with valve amps, to match them to loudspeakers which are efficient, have a relatively high sensitivity, with kind of at least 90 dB or more, sometimes 96 or even higher, kind of clip shears and those kind of things work really well, and JBLs and those kind of big American speakers work nicely. But find the right speakers that go loud with a relatively low amount of power, don't put too much strain on the output transformers, and ideally valves and vinyl, cracking combination.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think you've nailed it. It's not sort of half a kilowatt, but there's a bit of a rumor mill about maybe a slightly larger one of these coming out. Are we allowed to mention that? I'm not sure.
I think there's a Stereo 40.
Stereo 40. So that would be quite something, wouldn't it? But in the meantime, I think this Stereo 20 has just been a revelation, an absolute joy to have and to play with and to listen to. It's just been brilliant.
The only downside of the 21C is the price. It's £7,000. It starts at 7,000. I think it's even more if you get particular finishes.
Sure.
Which is obviously very expensive. But by the same token, it's all made in the UK. It's made in Wiltshire, just down the road from me, actually, where I live. It's obviously handmade. All of the components are very expensive. They're individually specified or designed. It's a kind of real artisan specialist product. It is emphatically not a kind of jazzed up Chinese valve amp from Shenzhen with a kind of fancy paint job. So it's very labor intensive to make. The quality of the products is extremely high. The finish is incredible. I think the cost to just get this amp painted is more than the cost price of most Chinese valve amps.
Yes.
So it's not a budget product that's great for kind of entry level stuff. It's a lovely thing to have in the way that people will spend a lot of money on treats to themselves, if they've got it. It works so well for what it does. It's very hard to fault if you can cope with the price, basically.
Of course. Yeah. I think it looks amazing as well.
Yeah.
Especially when it's fired up and the valves are glowing.
Yeah.
There's something quite gorgeous about it. There really is. But I think in terms of sound quality, it's a terrific sounding power amp, and I adore it. It's become one of my absolute favourites. It really has. So brilliant. Good old Peter Farrow, eh? Excellent.
Yes.
A nice guy, and it's a great product to boot. And I think, as I say, it would have been probably, despite the fact we'd have argued with him tooth and nail, it would be nice to know him in our younger years, wouldn't it? He'd be one of us, wouldn't he? I think.
Well. So. Having a name Nate One, Mike, that you know all about low powered amplifiers, so you've got some.
As much as my name.
Exactly, Nate. Yeah. You'd have something in common.
We would. Excellent. So look, let's do a riffometer on it.
Yes, I think I'm going to give it a 9. It would be nice if it was £5,000 and not 7, but Them's the breaks. It's, it's real quality. It's immaculate and superb in terms of its build quality and its sound. And you want good stuff, and it costs money.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 9 just for the free glove.
Yeah,
I mean, that's worth it just for me, just all on its own.
Exactly.
No, in all seriousness, I agree with you. Beautiful, great product. One of the finest amplifiers we've had the pleasure of reviewing on Hi-Fi Riff. So there we are. You heard it here first.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And we'd strongly urge you to listen to a great valve amplifier while you can. There we go. That's it.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed for watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff.
Cheers.
We will be back again in the next one. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take it away.